welcome everybody to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined in black by Anwar Richardson. We're both in black today. Anwar, we're talking Elite 11, and to me, that deserves a like and a subscribe if you haven't already done so. Like, you should just hit the like button as soon as you open the video for us as a solid to us. But if you want to wait, that's fine. We'll take it no matter when you want to give it. And we would love it if you would subscribe. Just hit the buttons and stuff. We are talking Elite 11 Anwar. We're talking about Maalik Murphy in particular, who went down this weekend, and it's a fascinating thing because this is his environment. This is where he has starred, and this is kind of where he became a prospect. I mean, it hasn't been through game film. It hasn't been through having a high school football season like a Cade Klubnik where you win the state championship and you ball out and people go, oh my God, that guy's an incredible football player. It's been at a camp circuit. And yet there's still something to be said about going down to the Elite 11 with the rest of the best quarterbacks in the country, whether it be Quinn Ewers or Cade Klubnik or anybody, and performing at a level that while you're there, people think you A, belong, and B, that they can still see the upside dripping from the kid. I came away really encouraged by the reports that I read about Murphy, even if some of them included language that we already knew about, which was a bit of a project, but my God, you should see this guy throw a football.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a unique prospect, Catch, because it's very rare that you see something like this in the quarterback realm. Like, I can't pinpoint that kind of thing. You hear about guys who maybe are, raw basketball players who then convert over to football and become really good tight ends. But very few times have you heard of a quarterback who wasn't excelling at the high school level being known as one of the top prospects that's out there. It's a fascinating thing. But here we are. And yes, in his setting, and I think that's the key word that you use, in his setting, that 7-on-7 competition setting. And there is some sort of competitiveness to that, but you're not getting hit, but there's still some competitiveness to it. That's where he looks good. That's where he excels. And you've heard positive reports from those who, rivals. I think Bruce Feldman had tweeted something out about him as well. So there was a lot of good, buzz. So, for Texas fans. And right now, he's the only quarterback in this class. So, I mean, it's at this point, unless he goes and Sarkisian picks up someone late, this is it, for the future. So I think the positive things, Catch, I know we'll go all around, is he's still a developmental quarterback. I mean, we all know that. And when he gets here, he'll be sitting, right? He's going to either sit behind Casey Thompson, he's going to sit behind Hudson Card. So if he has all the tools, at that point, you say, all right, well, it'd be great if you had some high school stats. But at that point, if you just got all the physical tools and you can sit there and develop, then that's what Sarkisian's here for.
I'm going to give you a hot take that I think you're going to disagree with.
Okay.
And we haven't disagreed a whole lot in the time.
We disagree a little bit on the running back thing, but I kind of proved your point in my Sunday column in some ways.
Yeah, it was in the middle, I thought. You could... at the end of the day, I wasn't going with that debate with a large sample size. I was just pointing to two guys and saying,
"Yeah, I got some sample size. You were more right than you were wrong."
Yeah, well, I don't know what that means, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to agree on this. And I guess my point is, through all of the years that I've been covering recruiting, I think I'm at a position. At least, well, I don't know, maybe it's different per position. It matters to me more that he's good in this environment than it is as a high school player during his junior season, where he was up and down. There were games when he wasn't really impressive. There were games where it was like, all right, well, Malik, there you go. At the end of the day, if I, as a college football coach, would place a value on one thing versus the other. And it's weird because rarely is this something at the quarterback position, like you said, that one has to do. I mean, if you watch Quinn Ewers this weekend and you were like, never seen him before, and you were like, man, that guy throws the football really well. How'd he do last year? Same thing with Klubnik, right? Like you look it up and you go, oh, okay. So they took their teams into state championship games, had awesome seasons. That's kind of what I expected. Murphy's not that guy, but if forced to choose between a guy who is going to tear it up on the field or tear it up in one of these camps, I'll take the guy who tears it up in the camp, because at the end of the day, I don't care what a guy does in high school. I just don't. Does he have the physical tools to make throws, to do the things at the next level that truly separate guys that, and there's some things about it that you don't get. You don't see what it's like when guys are coming at you in pads, and how does he operate in real pressure and things like that. But I need to know that a guy can make throws first and foremost. I don't care what his performance was in a state championship game if none of it translates to the next level. So if I had to choose one, I'd like Malik, if he's my guy, to go to a camp for 3 days surrounded by the best peers in the country, and to perform at a level where SI says he ranked as the second best guy that we followed all week, and Rivals ranks as number 6 out of 20. That is really impressive company to keep. And real quick, this is what Adam Gorney, who is head of Rivals recruiting right now, he says in an article that he published today, Tuesdays with Gorney, over at the Rivals.com network, quote, "There are two schools of thought on Murphy. Everyone knows the Texas commit looks like $1 million, and in camp and 7-on-7 settings, he can deliver the goods as well as anybody in the country, but in games he struggles. I'm changing any negative feelings about him now, and I'm convinced when surrounded with a strong offensive line and playmakers at receiver, Murphy is going to be a star in Austin. He was so good during long stretches at the Elite 11. He's arguably the best looking quarterback from a physical standpoint in the country. And when he has receivers who can get open and make plays, Murphy is going to be great for the Longhorns."
It doesn't matter what you do in high school. I have seen high school quarterbacks will their teams and carry teams that have been really bad on their back to at least the playoffs, right? That you have seen. I've seen guys who were I've seen high school quarterbacks who were just tremendous athletes who got switched to receiver. How many times have we seen this catch? But they in the high school setting, it was so easy that they were so good and athletic that's what they did. So I'm not saying that this doesn't necessarily mean Malik won't be good. I get this stuff, but something does have to matter when the lights come on. There's something has to matter when you hear footsteps or there's guys in the pocket. I think there's something that has to be said about leadership and being able to lead a team and carry a team on the back. And it's not just disparaging. We're just talking about stats, numbers, and just high school athletes and not him as a young man. And right now, it's good to be good at dating, Catch, but sometimes you got to get into a marriage at some point. And you can be like, man, when I was just practicing and I was just taking her out on a couple of dates here and there, and we were just courting each other, it was all great. But guess what happens when you get into marriage, Catch? You're in that house every single day. You're looking at each other every single day. And all of a sudden, you got to make sure, you got to see something in the dating process that makes you feel like the marriage thing. But as a marriage pro, I can tell you sometimes if you ignore some red flags, it shows up where it counts. So I will say this is my assessment of Malik. I think I agree with everyone that says he's got high upside. My only thought on him, and I think it's a fair one, is I haven't seen it in the high school ranks. And what everyone's asking me to believe is, even though it doesn't happen on the high school level, it will happen on the collegiate level. If that happens, more power to everyone involved, but there is a part of me that I will still have a little question mark about him going forward. I won't jump on the bandwagon. I'll be a little bit late to the party, but if there's a party to be had, I definitely will attend.
There's an interesting conversation. Look, I think everything you said is completely fair. And I think Malik would agree with you. Like, one of the things I really like about Malik, and apparently this occurred this week at the Elite 11, he handles hard coaching really well. and he isn't of the mindset that he's made it. He realizes that he hasn't played at a level that he needs to. He realizes, I think, that he's a little bit of a multi-year project, and there's like a hard-working, a listener. He takes listening. He takes being talking to like really well by all accounts. There's a thing though about him, and I'm just throwing this out there because it really is kind of a rhetorical question, but he plays for a bad team. And I know the program that he plays at hasn't been bad forever, but we all watched his team play last year because their season started late. So he commits to Texas, and then California starts its high school season. So Texas fans had nothing to do, but there was no other football but to watch Maalik Murphy on Fridays. And his team was awful. I mean, his receivers were awful. His line was awful. And the team wasn't very good. And I came out of that thinking to myself, that kid needs to be at a major Texas high school football program in the fall because he needs quality reps. If that kid transferred to Lake Travis, they would play in the state championship game, and his numbers this year would be through the roof. If you put him on South Lake Carroll, or if you put him on Austin Westlake, I have no doubts that his numbers would be up there with Klubnik's, or maybe not Ewers. Ewers is born to play for South Lake Carroll in that offense. But his numbers would be out of this world good. I really believe that. What is it? This is less about Maalik Murphy and more of, like I said, a rhetorical question. How harmful, though, is it because we're talking about Klubnik and Ewers? Those dudes play for elite programs with elite offensive coaching. What does it mean for an elite talent to be at a run-of-the-mill high school in an offense that does him zero favors? It doesn't feel like the kind of conversation I have very often. The last time I had it was about Tyrone Swoops, and it was, he's playing at this small school. He's not playing against real Division I college athletes. Like, what does it mean to even watch him play football against such a low level of competition? I wonder what it means for an elite quarterback prospect to basically have his time wasted in high school because he's not getting the kind of quality reps and coaching and game action that he would if he just happened to live in an area that provided him a better platform. I feel like the real problem with Maalik Murphy right now as a prospect on the high school level, I don't know how it gets better. I mean, I watched his team last year, just a few months ago, and all I could think was that dude needs to transfer. And I know he lives in California. He needs to transfer to Texas. He needs to do what Caleb Burton did and just transfer to Lake Travis. And he needs to apply his skill set in this final. And he really needs the reps. And I just don't know that he's currently in an environment that affords him the opportunity to look great. Whereas a lot of the other guys that we talk about, you could take them out and put in an average quarterback into those programs, and those average quarterbacks would have huge numbers because of the coaching and what's around them. It doesn't feel like to me that, when I watch Quinn Ewers play, I think to myself, any quarterback would succeed in that offense.
I totally disagree. I think Quinn Ewers is clearly the best guy on that team. And I look at Cade Klubnik, and I think Cade Klubnik is the best guy at Westlake. I mean,
but Anwar, there's a reason why every quarterback that South Lake Carroll has had for 20 years has thrown for more than 4,000 yards in every season.
Yeah,
and
those guys are elite.
Those guys have ever gone on to make a dent at the college level.
But those guys are elite. I think the difference to me in the eliteness of them is that I think they are still the best player at the best programs. So that to me almost puts them on an elevated status. I think you and I would take an opposing view on this because you feel like, well, they're good at the program. I don't think necessarily the program is making them.
Oh, I don't think that at all.
Yeah, I've seen Kate.
But I'm saying
I followed Kate Klubnik before he got to high school.
But
so hold on.
South Lake Carroll as a program over a 20-year stretch, Quinn Ewers is the best they've ever had in that system. They've had Chase Daniel, who obviously went on to be a college All-American. He was a phenomenal college player. They've had other players. And some of these guys have signed to go to college, and it never happens for them. But every guy they've ever had almost takes them to a state championship game every year. Now, Quinn Ewers is the best that they've had. I'm not minimalizing I'm not suggesting that his talent is somehow lessened. I'm just saying you take that elite guy and you put him on the best high school football platform possible for a high school quarterback in the state of Texas. And that kid's going to eat and get quality reps and be better every day that he goes to practice. He gets better. And when you're elite and that's happening, it only takes your skill set to another level. My concern with Maalik Murphy is that when you're at a program that's not affording you that, you need to be growing the way Quinn Ewers gets to grow every day at practice. And I just wonder what it means for a kid when he goes from high school to college and the starting points aren't even. Just when Jaquindon Jackson came to Texas and he was in the Hudson Card class, my whole concern at that point was Jaquindon is not getting the kind of quality reps. Part of it was because of his injury that Hudson Card was getting, and that when they would show up, they would not be even. This would not be equal starting points. And that ends up becoming an issue. If we're running a 100-meter race and I get 30 yards of a head start on you, like that will change the way the outcome ends. And I think Maalik Murphy's just at a disadvantage. I guess my last point on this would just be, I think Maalik Murphy's at a disadvantage compared to Quinn Ewers. Not saying at all that I think Quinn Ewers or Cade Klubnik is where they are because of the programs they're in. I'm just saying they've been elevated even higher. If you put Cade Klubnik on Maalik Murphy's team, he doesn't go to a California State Championship game last year. I bet
you to go to the playoffs. I bet you to go to the playoffs.
Maybe. That was a bad team.
He's got enough speed in the 200 where I feel like he's at least multifaceted where they can go to the playoffs.
Well, look, you and I would both rate Cade Klubnik ahead of Maalik Murphy. So maybe that's not the right conversation, because I would do the same thing with Quinn Ewers. I would have him rated ahead of Maalik Murphy. But I'm telling you, that team he played on last year, I've played on bad football teams. I've covered a lot of bad football teams. That kid played on a bad football team, and there were too many times when I saw him make throws. 3rd and 17, he puts the ball right where it needs to be, ball drop, team has to punt. And it's like, well, that looks like an incompletion in the stat book. But he stood in the pocket and made a great throw and hit a guy in the numbers and didn't get rewarded for it. That doesn't happen at Austin Westlake or South Lake Carroll. They catch that ball. Now, they ain't going to college, most of those kids. They might run 4.9, but they are well coached. They would be in the playoffs regardless of who their quarterback is. And, I'm worried for Maalik Murphy that where he plays his high school football will hold him back when he gets to college in a way that I just would never even consider for not for Ewers, not for Klubnik, not for Connor Weigman, not for even Nick Evers, who's at Florida, and he's not even like a pro-style quarterback, but I know he's getting in a good program, good reps. I don't know. You got anything else?
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on it is I think one of the things that I think serves maybe is a little bit of a disservice to Maalik Murphy. And again, I think I want to stay employed by rivals, but you said we got to keep it real on the channel, right? So I got to keep it real on the channel. I think putting a guy like that who doesn't have a bunch of high school numbers or reps and then putting him in the category of a Quinn Ewers, of Cade Klubnik, of Weidman and being and so it could be compared, I think that does him a disservice. Because
that sounds like a conversation you need to have with Steve Sarkisian then.
Well, no, no, because that's totally two different things. And maybe to your point, but I don't think Steve Sarkisian's comparing him to anybody. But if we are going to compare him, we're comparing a guy who we know we're comparing a guy who doesn't have stats to the guys who we know are going to state championships. So it's almost a little bit unfair to him, and it's been really unfair for the conversation, to be quite honest with you, because we know what he is. And again, how many other guys are getting ranked purely off of 7-on-7 play at the wide receiver position, at the running back position, at any other positions? How many guys are getting ranked and then being told, well, he doesn't have the stats, but we feel like he's really good? Well, then you've kind of setting him up for these kind of comparisons where he kind of takes a little bit of a knock. And I think in the ideal world,
that's just nothing I ever say. I personally, Anwar, never say a guy doesn't have high school stats. It never crosses my mind. When I first got into this business way back,
it crosses the mind of most coaches.
What's that?
Of course, it's the mind of most coaches. This is an anomaly. This is not the norm.
Oh no, I mean, he's a unicorn of sorts, but it happens way less at the quarterback position. But I don't look at running backs or receivers. Look, if Dez Bryant had caught 10 passes as a high school senior, I wouldn't have cared. And, we've gotten to a point now where we've seen guys get offered before they even play varsity football. Like, a lot of the decision-making that gets made at this point is based on football not in pads. But I can just say if a guy's I'm just having a hard time thinking of examples. I usually have to go to positions other than quarterback. I can remember when Jonathan Scott was a 5-star offensive lineman signed to go to the University of Texas, but he wasn't all district. And I can remember hearing, how can this guy be a rival's 5-star when he didn't even make all district? And it was like, well, because he's like 6'6", 300 pounds, and he moves like a dancing bear. And people were convinced Rivals has got it wrong. And it was like, well, but he's incredibly talented. Like, you should see this guy. And then he ends up being like a 3-year starter at left tackle for Texas, plays on an All-American team or plays on a national championship team and plays in the NFL for a long time. What he did in high school just didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Yeah, but those all-county, all-district teams are a little bit bogus, though.
You're talking to the guy that thinks Big 12 teams most of the time.
I mean, I hear what you're saying as that example, but as a guy who did high school sports for years and it has been there, there's a lot of bias with those things. There are high school writers who end up being buddies with a certain coach. There's a lot of, you take care of me, I take care of that guy. Someone is helping some. They ask other coaches, do they really think this guy is good? And rival coaches will tell the reporter that I don't think he's good. He's not a first teamer. He's really more like a second teamer. So I would. And one day I'll tell you about a huge controversy in Tampa when I worked there, where essentially one of the high school writers voted Jared Faison, who was I'll end it on this. Jared Faison was in Tampa, and he went on to the University of Florida. And he was a really good quarterback, but he went on to play receiver. And at the University of Florida, and there was a high school writer that you're supposed to vote for, like, player of the year on kind of like a 1 to 10 scale, and you basically, the highest ones get the highest amount of points. And because she was buddies with one of the high school coaches, she voted Jared Faison absolutely dead last in order to skew the vote. They eventually found out about it and they fired her. So when I hear about like all county, all district teams, all that type of stuff, I'm just like, I hear what you're saying. I
think you're distracted by the history of all district teams. I'm just saying, once upon a time, Jonathan Scott was viewed as a very average offensive line player who wasn't a next level player in high school, but he was rated as a 5-star. And I ranked him I don't know, second or third in the state. I'd have to go back and look at what my Jonathan Scott ranking was back in 2001. But in the end, like the talent matters more than high school production. We don't often have to have that conversation, but in a world where we do, I'd rather take my chances on the guy with all of the talent in the world who just hasn't harnessed it right yet in an environment that will allow him to properly harness it over a guy with less talent, but way more production. And the thing that everybody agrees with regards to Maalik Murphy is that from a raw talent, physical standpoint, you can probably count the number of peers he has truly on one hand and only a couple of fingers. Doesn't mean he's a slam dunk, but it just means that when he arrives in college, the one thing he won't lack is physical ability. The rest of it remains to be seen, which is something that I think both Anwar and I would 100% agree with. Look, for myself and Anwar Richardson, do us a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Later.